This Switch Watch was meant to be about 20 games I wanted to see ported to Nintendo Switch, but I figured that this should be covered in future Switch Watch videos where I talk in details about what games should come to the Switch. Furthermore, the first two Source Filmmaker videos you will see was based off a cancelled Switch Watch video I was planning with back in 2019. But regardless, the show must go on. Enjoy my 100th Switch Watch, and special thanks goes to Drac Keagan VA as the voice of Starlight, Glimmer, Cozy Glow, and Queen Chrysalis.
You sure seem eager to play Final Fantasy VIII on the Switch. Come on! I've been a PlayStation girl since when I was young, and Final Fantasy VIII was one of my favorites. Yeah, but your Switch is full of so-called PlayStation titles. What can I say? I'm a sucker for playing old PlayStation titles on the Nintendo Switch. Maybe that explains certain games like the Spyro Reignited trilogy.
It's no surprise that the Nintendo Switch has come a long way. As I speak, the system is on its way to outselling the Nintendo DS as the highest selling Nintendo system overall. In a way, it's also in its swan song years, as the Switch 2 is right around the corner, or rather in 2025. However, in this day and age, there is one thing that still holds up to this day. Classic games still rule. In fact, we live in an era where bloated, unfinished AAA titles and microtransaction-filled live services are far more common in the spotlight, getting the wrong kind of attention and just leaving everything else in the dust. The few bright parts of the industry includes indie titles like Hollow Knight, low-cost AA games like Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and of course, ports, remakes, remasters, or compilations of older titles, which for the latter says a whole lot since we've been flooded with a number of these for the past 7 years of the Nintendo Switch's legacy. Oh boy, I don't know where to begin. Throughout the early years of the Nintendo Switch, a number of Wii U titles were ported over to the little hybrid that could, starting with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in 2017. A good chunk of the Wii U library was salvaged out of the ecosystem and placed onto the Nintendo Switch. Some of these titles came with every bit of DLC from the original, like Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. Some were given some additional content to the game, like Super Mario 3D World, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and Pikmin 3 Deluxe. Others were given a slight touch-up, like Bayonetta 2 and Bit Trip Runner 2 Future Legend of Rhythm Alien. Yes, I wish there were more Wii U games that were given the Switch treatment, and I'll cover that later in this video. But it was still great that Nintendo went out of its way to give these games a second chance. Another element that came back during the Switch era were game compilations, basically a collection of games that were packed onto a cartridge, or rather onto a single app. Some are from many of the most commonly known games like Sonic Origins Collection, Sega Genesis Collection, the Mega Man Collections, Castlevania, Contra, and Namco Museum. Even the Mana series got a collection of 3 of its own games through the Collection of Mana. But there are some collections that are also worth picking up from lesser titles like the Darius and Turrican collections, Double Dragon, Kunio-kun, the Taito Milestones, the SNK Collection, Rocket Knight Adventures, Valis of Phantasm Soldier, the Tiger Heli Collection, and of course, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga Collection. And to be honest, there are still a lot of games I want to see in these compilations. But at the same time, I don't think what I listed scratched the surface of the amount of compilations on Nintendo Switch. And while there's always a place for new games, there's also a place for the classics that jumped onto modern systems and or PC services just for newcomers to try the games out. And you can tell what the obvious example is, Nintendo Switch. In fact, what makes me appreciate the Nintendo Switch a whole lot more is the fact that a number of older games made their way onto the system, some of which has never even touched the Nintendo system before, like Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, Red Dead Redemption, Persona 3 and 4, Dot Hat GU, and even Diablo. And you know well that even games from previous Nintendo systems like Xenoblade Chronicles, Zelda Skyward Sword, Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, the Super Mario RPG Remake, and the Metroid Prime Remastered really help balance things out between third-party games and Nintendo games. And oh boy, I think there are still some titles I missed out on.
Wow, that was completely morbid. I'm going to enjoy this Sephiroth character from Final Fantasy VII.
Now, as you could tell, this Switch Watch was originally meant to talk about games from the early PlayStation eras that were ported to the Switch in its early days. But even so, we can still talk about that kind of topic, because there are still a number of PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 titles on Nintendo's little system, which was rather ironic since during that time, there were a lot of those titles being ported to the Switch, while Nintendo's 64 games barely saw the light of day on that system. The most ironic case and example includes the Crash Bandicoot N-Sane trilogy and the Spyro Reignited trilogy. Both trilogies were originally released by Sony's own first-party studios, Naughty Dog and Insomniac, on the PlayStation 1. And while they're not the original titles that many fans remembered, it still matters a lot that a variation of these games can be played on the Nintendo Switch, alongside the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. But still, there are some PlayStation titles that deserve to jump to modern systems. Which brings me to my next topic, my own personal criticism. And it's rather simple. There aren't enough classic games ported to Nintendo Switch or even other systems, be it console, PC, or mobile, even despite the overwhelming number of titles. According to a July 10th, 2023 article from the Video Game History Foundation, 87% of classic video games released before 2010 are not available to purchase on the market, which means to access these games, you'd have to go to a library, an archive, or, and I'm not sorry to say this, you have to emulate these games on your computer. Yeah, I had to go and say that because there are still a lot of games from the past that are not available to purchase, some of which we enjoyed in the past, and others we have never heard of until now. In fact, even Nintendo of all companies deserves this kind of criticism as well. First off, while there are games available for the Nintendo Switch Online subscribers, there should also be an option to buy these games separate for those who don't want the subscription. It's just like how DLC is handled for the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack users with Splatoon 2, Animal Crossing, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Some of us don't want to pay a monthly or yearly fee, or even have to log into the account just to play these games. And second off, while Nintendo has done a good job in porting some of their games to Nintendo Switch, there are other games from the GameCube, Wii, Wii U, DS, and 3DS era that needs to be optimized for Nintendo's hybrid console. Games that, in a way, are totally unavailable to purchase at all. For many, they are considered lost media unless one resorts to emulation. And don't get me started on Super Mario 3D All-Stars. While it was good to see Nintendo port these 3 Mario games to the Switch, that's no excuse to make it a limited time release. In fact, the video game industry has no excuse on this one when we do have older titles on modern systems and digital storefronts. And it's not just that. Some games that were previously on digital storefronts are sometimes removed from these storefronts. Some because of licensing issues, some due to conflicts between the developers and publishers, and others just for no reason whatsoever. But regardless, and as I said, there is no excuse to not cut these games out for those who never played them. The gaming industry, in fact, the whole entertainment industry, is treating its own legacy like it was worth nothing. throwing aside what made it great in the first place, all in the name of a quick buck through these live services. And once those dry up, they simply put them out to pasture and look for the next best thing. It's a constant cycle that does no favor to the legacy of video games and puts it at risk of being lost media, even if many of these games can be preserved through emulation, and we need to call out the entire industry for it. But I digress. In the coming months, I'll be talking about games that deserve to be ported to the Nintendo Switch, not just first-party titles, but also third-party titles as well, some of which have never been re-released on any console at all, still bound to a previous generation and is at risk of being a lost media. There should be more of a call to have more ports, remasters, remakes, and compilations, not just on the Switch, but across every system on this planet. But hey, only time will tell if our call does reach out or if the industry decides to throw its own future away. Anyway, that's my opinion. What's yours?
So, you were more of a Sega Genesis, Philly?
Of course, but I prefer to call it the Mega Drive.
So, what was this Mega Drive like?
It was more arcade-like compared to the Super Nintendo, and best of all, it had a really bloody take on Mortal Kombat.
Chrysalis, you know she's too young to play those kinds of games.
Oh, that's all right. Besides, I've played worse on Nintendo Switch.
You know, it's a shame that we don't see more of these classic games, regardless if it's the Switch or another system.
You got me on that one. It's a shame that some companies don't respect their own history.
What a shame. Guess they care more about their shareholders than they do with their own legacy.